Some people ask me, why did you have a second book done 3 years after the other one? Well, the reason is that the two books are quite different. The first book covered a much larger scope of my work, my seascapes, which I spend much time experimenting with, looking beyond my horizons. And at the same time, I have been painting all my life through small paintings. They're like a thread that goes through my production. So, and they are generally about people who are living their lives in the comfort of their own space. So, in order to understand why this subject has gone through all my life for the last 50 or so years, I have to speak a little bit about Scotland. Well, I should say, I did say once that an artist is born with a small set of poems, and it's the exploration of that personal mythology that defines him as an artist. And I guess those are my small poems. Anyhow, to go back to what I was saying, I think we have to go back to my roots in Scotland. I was born, as many of you know, I was born in a small town on the edge of the Atlantic on one side, and on behind me there was a large hill called Dundonald Hills. And we're talking about the 1930s, 1940s. Goes back to that. I was about 10 years old, 10, 12. And my boundaries were very small. As the Atlantic, the Dundonald Hills. And I would walk exploring the tidal pools along the coast, or climbing Dundonald Hills looking for birds' eggs, coats and kestrels. And I'd pass all those little white farms with, I'd peek in, I'd see the women feeding the birds, or someone fixing the roof. And at that age, you are filled with a sense of awe, of just simply being there, being alive, seeing other people's lives. It was not just ordinary lives. They were inordinate, they were unusual when you were that young. It expressed the wonder of being alive, the wonder of being there at that time. It was a wonderful experience, and the main thing I take away from that time in Scotland is that there was a great sense of being a part of a community. As I say, it was a small area for a young boy to walk around, but there was always a sense of comfort, a sense of safety. You know, you walked everywhere, and strangers, there was no such thing as a stranger. There were only people you had never met. So, and as an example, it's an extreme example, but I remember one winter evening while walking back from town, I always passed this little shop, one of those gift shops, that fancy, expensive gift shops that had writing materials in the window. There were leather diaries, there were inkwells with silver on them. And in the very center of this window was the most beautiful tortoise shell fountain pen shining up there. And this was a particularly cold winter evening, the first snowflakes falling just before Christmas. And I'm standing there, I always stood there when I passed it, and I looked at this beautiful pen, which I could never afford. I was way out of my realm. But I'm looking at it anyhow. And I'm aware that someone is standing beside me. And I look, it's a well-dressed man, elderly well-dressed man. And he says to me, he turns to me and he says, if you had anything in this window you would want, what would you have? And I said, oh, I'd have that pen. So he said, well, just wait here. He went into the shop and he came back and said, here you are, handed me the pen, smiled and left. I never saw him again. But that was the kind of thing, it wasn't I never felt it exceptional. I never said, oh my God, that was dangerous, that strange man. No, nothing like that. No, it was acceptable. He was part of the community. He was just a kind person, same as everybody else. So this is what I remember when I lived in Scotland as a young boy. I remember that feeling of being a part of the community, of an extended family. And that has stayed with me. When I go back to Scotland, which I do occasionally, in my 80s, I go into a pub, and there's a beautiful young barmaid. She looks up and she says, well, what you have, son? I love that. I love that, son. Yeah, I'm being brought back into the family. It's wonderful. Well, you know, it's not much different. When I moved to this country, I moved up to Washington County. Of course, when you get there, people call me dear. You know, I'm son in Scotland, I'm dear there. How are you, dear? Because most of the men called me dear. That was a bit dicey. But anyhow, it was very nice. I felt much the same way. Washington County was much the same way to me as Scotland was. People were very friendly. Here I am, from away. I can't hide it. I'm from away. And I rented an A-frame on the coast at Tom Layton Point, which is near Millbridge. And I got friendly I was there with my late wife, and we got friendly with the lobstermen there. We'd go out on his boat and that kind of thing. I got friendly with them. Of course, at the end of summer, they had to shut off the water from the A-frame. So my wife and I had to find a place to stay. So we rented a house in Cherryfield on the Narragansett. And I said to my lobsterman friend, Eddie was his name, I said to Eddie, you know, we're moving, I'm sorry to leave, and so on. He said, well, your house is empty, what are you going to do? And I said, well, my wife and I have sleeping bags. We'll throw them on the floor. We'll sleep on the floor until we find furniture. So anyhow, my wife wasn't too happy with that idea, but nevertheless. So we got up to the house. And there, the first time we got there, and there in the driveway, this truck filled with furniture. And there's Eddie at the driver's wheel. He had gone through his barn, he got a bed and chairs and everything, and that's how we furnished the house. So there was that feeling in Washington County that made me feel at home. And from there, I traveled around quite a bit in Washington County with my sketchbook. Didn't have an iPhone in these days, so I had to. If anything you wanted to record, took your sketchbook. So I went around. I went to Jonesport. Jonesport I loved. I don't know how many people know Jonesport. A great fishing village. Beals Island. Loved Beals Island. Korea, of course. Toronto. So I would go around all those places. I would watch the fishermen and their wives going about their daily business, hanging a wash, mending the roof, doing all the different things that people do. And I was impressed. To me, it was not just an ordinary life. There was something that filled me with awe, like it had in Scotland. There's something very magical about how people live their lives. The beauty of a simple life, that attracted me so much. And I saw it there and reminded me of my times in Scotland. So that really is why I think, with my roots in Scotland and my experiences in Washington County, I think that's really the thread that gave me the insistence to keep painting in this manner that you see behind me. I think I'd like to mention, that's just a background to the paintings. I would like to mention some of the, something about the paintings themselves. Let me just see, this is my speechwriter. He doesn't know anything about art. Where is he? But, anyhow, I want to speak first about, I deliberately alter the paintings. You know, I flatten the houses. I simplify the surroundings. I simplify the figures. And there's a purpose to that. I want to remove obstacles that get in the way of the expression. Logic sometimes gets in the way. I have a quote here. Where is it? Get my glasses. Let me see. There's a quote that, from whom? Oh, there's a quote here. Well, Manny once said that art is not to portray, but to evoke. And I think that's important. I think realism or the enemy of this is what I said. The rational is the enemy of the real. It's the enemy of the spiritual. And so I don't really want to complicate things by making it real. People, first of all, that's what they jump at, the real thing. I want to remove that sense, but it's a fine line you have to walk. You have to still have a certain, you can suspend belief, but you can't destroy belief. So you have to have the viewer accept your alterations in order to express the spiritual. And so there's a fine line. And I do that, I work at it, and sometimes I'm successful, sometimes I'm not. But that's basically why there are distortions in my painting. They are intentional. So that is one of the methods, one of the things I want to mention. Now, the execution, I think it was Matisse who said that creativity takes courage. And I think that's very true. Creativity takes courage. I usually load my palette knife with paint. And the best way to work is to attack. I attack. You know, and sometimes it might leave a mess, but that's like the mess in a battlefield after victory. You know, it's the victory of what you're saying that's important. Forget about the mess you've made. So I think that's that, and also let me see what else. Yeah, the time it used to it used to take me about a week to do a painting. I'm talking about way back. We go back like 50 years. It used to take me a week to paint. And then I managed to reduce that to half a week. Then as I get older, it takes 2 days. Then it takes 1 day. Now it takes half a day. Now, when I get to 1 hour, then I know I've succeeded. But anyhow. So I should also mention one other thing. I got an email the other day from a woman I had never met. She said she loves my paintings. They make her happy. Now, when I first read that, I thought, well, wait a minute, I'm not sure if happy is a good Now, I'm not sure if that's good. But then I realized, hey, happy is good. Happy is good. And I know that the range of art encompasses the bad as well as the beautiful, the agony and the ecstasy. I know that art encompasses that whole scope. And I know that everyone experiences sometimes some sadness. And I've had sadness in my own life. But my own personal nature, perhaps because of my upbringing in Scotland and my life here, my nature is not to dwell on the dark side. So that's why my paintings, I hope, make her happy. And if my paintings make you happy, then I'm happy. So anyhow, I think that's all I'm going to say at the moment, actually. We can talk.
Hi, I'm Carl Little, and I wrote this poem based on a painting of Bill Irvine's called Bringing in the Cat. Little house of hers. Every evening, except when it rains, Innes stands by the door of this little house of hers, nestled in the greenwood, and calls her pussycat to quit his hunting. The cat leaps into her arms. Black is the night gliding in among the trees that back this little house of hers with its plank door and white clapboards. The cat brings comfort through the dusk, till moonlight enters this little house of hers through the one window near the eaves. Innes wears her best blue dress and thinks this little house of hers sometimes seems like the handiwork of a painter wielding a palette knife. She sighs, hugs the cat, and takes her nightly turn upon this humble stage. Thank you.
And thanks.
Your pen is not here.
But it's not. I should have brought the painting. I should have brought. Now I'm going to have to describe it. Everybody should now buy the book so you can see the painting. What page is it on? I have a poem.
You could hold it up.
I will hold it up as soon as I can find it. Do you know? Here it is. Okay. Can I tell a little story about it? Okay. So you talk about happy. Well, in my study at home, which is full of gloomy books, there is one postcard of a tiny house. And that's the happy spot in that study. And where's Donna? You can, and I've always wanted to have one of the tiny house series. And I realize you're riding the cusp of a whole social movement also with this, which is the skill of the artist to be just slightly ahead of the world. And so I always wanted to have that. So this last November, I was driving a disabled friend of mine on an art tour of New England. We had driven all over the place. He's from the Midwest, and so I was just driving him and taking him to museums and galleries. And we stopped here, and he came in with me, and I saw this painting, which I've forgotten because it's not the same title as my poem. A woman with apple tree.
I guess it was. Whatever it said.
Girl eating an apple. Okay, all right. Okay. And I saw this picture in here, and I said, "This is it." But I make myself, if I'm going to have ever a purchase of anything, 5 minutes, you have to think about it. And I didn't have 5 minutes. My friend bolted out the door. He said, "Let's go to the next museum." I had to leave and follow him. And for a week I traveled. And I sweated out every night that it was going to be sold. Because I left this picture. And when I came out, you guys will remember, when I came back here, I was so relieved to see it still here. And it was like lying on the ground. I thought maybe somebody had bought it. You hadn't. And so I was so happy to get that picture, just not for myself, but as a present. Otherwise, if it weren't a present, I could have had my local agent buy it for me. But it was a secret from her, so I couldn't do that. So anyway, this painting ended up with us. I was also teaching a class at COA at the time, just about to teach a class in we call satanic verses, in all the kinds of satanic literature. So naturally, I looked at you. I don't know if you can see it. I looked at this little picture of this little tiny house with an apple tree in front of it, a few seagulls, a nude eating an apple, and just the hint of the back of somebody in here who also doesn't have anything on. And so I was thinking along the lines of Genesis when that's how I'm going to get to it. So if you can see it, I don't know. It's an apple tree and a great tiny house. And so when Bill called me or wrote me and said, "Will you produce a piece of writing about it?" I did that, and then I just assumed that every other owner had been summoned. Also, they're all going to write stuff. So this is called First Couple, okay? Real nudists love apples, and we always have. Someone said maybe we shouldn't eat them, but what the hell? We'd just been created, and we were starved. It was either the apples or the herring gulls. No one would know. No one else even existed. Just this one little garter snake on an innocent rock. I said, Bill, we're being stupid. He's not even around. You're tallest. Reach up and pick me one. We ate the apple. We ate the core and we swallowed the seeds of time. Then, honest to God, the sky darkened and the sun went out. It started snowing. And a plow drove past that said Maine Department of Transportation. 15 below zero. And there we stood, not even underwear. I gave him an ultimatum. I said, Bill, build us a little house with a wood stove, or I'm leaving for Mexico. What's more, you and those seagulls have eaten half the apples. You've had your limit, butt out. This one belongs to me.
Is about this. I've called it Scottish Gothic, and I'm not sure that would be the same thing Bill would call it. You may have a different idea in mind, but that's Scottish Gothic. Perched on the handle of the basket in the early morning blush, and gazing at the two dour figures, the white bird seems to be sizing up the painting he may do. You know, the Scottish Gothic. He'd change a few things, put it all on the horizontal, square up the heads and bodies, put a garden rake in the man's hands. And there they'd be, solid as the earth, his very own people.
My name is Liz Rees. Thank you. Thank you, Bill, for inviting me to be in this book. There's a reference to Skye in this poem. It's the Isle of Skye in Scotland. Hanging the wash. The woman in a lemon drop shift arm wrestles the wind to hang her rectangles of white and ochre, orange and buttermilk, stiff, snapping. Her clothesline stoops to a wind that stormed all the way from Skye. Now a hungry fog waits on the hill at the edge of her rocky field, like a fox who waits for cover. This wind hurts her head. She is as tired as Eve. She has raised tall sons, still misses her husband. How many more loads of wash will she hang before her house unmoors from its slip?
Should be somewhere. Who did all of that?
I don't know.
Well, I guess. Basically, this house in the fog. A woman peeking out of the window with her house almost disappearing in the fog. Right?
Yeah, it looks good.
That's good enough. Okay.
It's good. Sun salutation. At 5 every morning, a church of birds convenes near my window, so loud it wakes me. But I love this hour because it is safe and blue. When I lie back down along you, I wonder if duty drives birds to sing or just delight. Squeezing your sleep with my hands, I climb in feather by feather, and giddy with luck, I find you. Our bodies hum a phrase of O's, birds hovering over our wonder.
One closest is this one here.
Yes, this
That's
is
the
it.
closest one.
I love these little house paintings because it's the life I aspire to. someday I'm going to have this life. And also I love Bill's work because he's a feminist in the most wonderful way. All his women are so independent and capable that it's really who I want to be. She says the same thing, right? She says the same thing. So our painting came about a little differently because I had a book come out last year, and I called on my painter friends to read the galleys and paint from a passage. So you can only call on your painter friends because no one else would do that for you, actually. So I actually own the painting that Bill painted from my book, but this is very close, and I just have to find it in here. Yeah, here it is. It's so great. Okay. The sun is now hidden, splattered over with gray clouds that tumble on the salty winds. Leaning on the doorframe, I recall a favorite painting of a large woman filling up the doorway of a fisherman's shanty. Her hair is wild, black as engine grease, and she is big, with hefty hands holding a bouquet of daisies. Her dress is ochre, darker than the seeds of the daisies, and there is a seagull perched on the saggy shanty roof. The woman doesn't appear to be waiting for anyone. It seems that she has picked the flowers for herself, and that the day belongs to her. She doesn't even care if people believe she exists, and therefore she has no need to play, he loves me not.
Thank you. Well, I'm going last because I actually did do a couple poems in the book, but that's because I used to write a little bit for my own amusement, actually, for my own pleasure. Amusement's not good. Sometimes I felt like putting work together. I don't consider myself a poet in any way. I don't think I'm in any way on the same caliber as the people who have been writing. But I did write a couple of pieces. Which one? Let's see, where is she? There she is. This one here. I wrote a piece about this. Let me just read it to you. It's called Girl at the Door. She has left the shadows behind, caught in the corners of her bed, and the cloak of her dreams shed like yesterday's clothes. With a magician's hand, she opens up the sea and the sun, and the single gull, like herself, about to soar. Then I have a second one. Actually, I don't know where it is. What happened to, it's gone actually, it's sold and gone. Anyhow, this one was more, I mentioned earlier how in my youth, in my past, the Dundonald Hills was a part of my upbringing. This beautiful green hill that lay behind me as I grew up, and I would explore. So this was written, and it's called Remembering Dundonald Hills. In my dreaming, sheep sleep on green hills, bald as my father's head. High over the Firth of Clyde, past brooks and brambles and magpie meadows, I carry the sun on my shoulder. But when the rain crops the hill, I find shelter in the wee farmhouse that'll always be there. And that's my point. So, thank you. So I think, if there are any questions, anyone who wants to ask questions, I'll do my best. If you want to question any of the writers, that'll be fine too. So it's open to you. I really was really amazed at my life. The beauty of things really struck me hard, you know. And I found that, I found when I saw paintings that they seemed to capture that magic that I felt. And so I realized that if I wanted to find some kind of explanation or some kind of balance within my emotions, I would become an artist and try to put those pieces together and get that feeling of equilibrium, if you see what I mean. But it was a sense of realizing that painting embodied the kind of feelings which I had when I went out there and saw the wonder of everything. Because to me, paintings are an incredible experience to enter into those visions of other artists. And that's part of the reason why I did, at the age of 12, I became an artist. Oh, thank you. Yes?
So were there artists that you studied in art history that particularly moved you or influenced you, or that you particularly admired?
Yes, there are two things I can remember when I was very young, that is. When I was very young, there are two things that I remember very vividly. One was when I was probably about 14 or 15, I was at secondary school, and I was taking art with another friend of mine who actually became a famous painter in England. But the two of us were interested in art, and one of there was the Johnny Walker Scotch magnate had a house in Troon, and where I lived. And he heard that myself and my friend, were really interested in art. So he invited us over to see his paintings. He had a collection, a great collection. It was the first time I had ever seen real art. I'd seen paintings in reproductions, in magazines. Sometimes I'd tear out the magazine and I'd keep it in my pocket and I'd open it. And there was one in particular I loved, a surrealist painting that really caught my imagination, and I kept looking at it wherever I went. It was ridiculous. But anyhow, when I went to Walker's house, Johnny Walker's house, and Walker family actually, and I looked at the paintings, and it was absolutely marvelous to see real paintings. It really hit me, seeing the texture, the color, and everything. It was just wonderful. The second thing actually was while I was at art school in Glasgow, they had an exhibition of the Picasso Matisse show, which came up just after the Second World War. I guess it was about 1946-47 was the exhibition, and it came to Glasgow. And I remember there was a painting there that just floored me. It hit me in the guts. I felt so emotionally hit by this painting. It was actually, I remember, it was a woman with a sea urchin, woman carrying sea urchins. And the funny thing is, Mars and I were in the south of France last summer there, and we went to the Antibes, we went to the Picasso Museum there, and there was that painting that meant so much to me when I was young. So those are the two things probably that influenced me more than anything else. It wasn't so much, technique doesn't interest me so much. What really was influential with me was the impact of imagery and what it could do. That more than anything else was what I motivated me and captured me. Any other questions? Yeah.
How do you keep your sense of wonder?
Oh, well, that's interesting, actually. I really don't know. But I really don't know why. It's not a conscious thing, obviously. I can't say I'm going in there to work today and I'm going to do this or that. No. I often go into the studio not knowing what I'm going to do. But my energy rises when I go into the studio. I feel energetic. I feel ready to start. And then my mind starts to click and bring things together. I often look at my sketches, and that will help focus on what I want to do. But sometimes at night, if I'm lying in bed, I'll begin to see things that will get me going next morning. The good thing is, I prefer paintings to take me by surprise. Because if it doesn't take you by surprise, it's not going to take anyone else by surprise. So that's how it works. Anyone else before we, oh, yes.
I was curious about your larger paintings. Are those more recent than the small house paintings?
No, they're not actually. No, they're not. The small house painting, but it is interesting. When I first started painting my house paintings, they were large, 40 by 60 inches. They've shrunk now. They've shrunk to this size. When I did when I did the seascapes, they started small. Now they've grown large. But the only reason why they're smaller now than they were before was because, as I explained, I like to complete them at one go. I like to get it, put it down, get it over with, get it out, and have it finished. That's why they're smaller. Larger paintings, you fool around too much. You get too nice. You you get too polite when you do big paintings. So that's why they're smaller now. But no, all the paintings in this show were done in the last 12 months. So those are all done in the last 12 months.
The larger ones seem very different, some almost into the abstract. And so was your thinking very different when you painted those?
But I'm not quite sure what you're saying there.
Some of the paintings seem almost, the larger paintings seem almost into the abstract.
Yes. Well, this is what this is the way I work, and I want to explore more in my work, and those explorations tend to be connected to my seascapes and my landscapes. Those are where I try to go beyond my horizon and get beyond that into new fields, new horizons. The slow house paintings, as I tried to explain before, actually, are just simply my own personal poems, the pleasure I get out of painting them. They're not intended to be new, exciting, different. They are expressions of a particular sense of wonder and feeling, and that's all. That's why I still do them when I feel like it. But if I want to be, if I really want to explore new horizons, then I'm on to seascapes and landscapes. The two things live side by side.